Hi guys, welcome to today's episode. We're going to be recreating the viral supreme croissant from the Lafayette bakery in New York. I have a bone to pick with all croissants and all fancy desserts. Why do you have to put eggs in all of them? Like literally all of them. So we're going to find our own solution and recreate a pistache chocolate and a secret ingredient and make it kind of Mediterranean inspired, and let's see how it goes. I'm going to link all the recipes that I used to come to this in the links below, so you should be able to recreate the same with ease. So the base recipe that I'm going to follow for the puff pastry, which is what makes the croissant, is linked below. Technically croissant is a bread, but we are doing a cross between a puff pastry and a croissant and a donut. So it is a sweet treat and very sinful in all aspects. So be a little careful if it turns out to be tasty. We're going to be using maida. I'm not a big fan of maida, but this is to understand that for the puff pastry you need a kind of texture which can be achieved with dough that has less fiber. So we're going to be recreating a smaller portion of the recipe because this is like a test batch really. I'm going to be creating half of what is mentioned, that is for 1 cup of the flour. So I'm using a food processor, but you could use your hand to like make the puff pastry dough. This is just quicker considering the time that we have. So I'm using 1 cup of flour, and for the 1 cup of flour I'm using half cup of butter. If that doesn't already scare you, I don't know what will. So this is 1 stick of butter. It says half cup and it's 1/4 of a pound, and you can translate it to grams. I should expect this should be about 150 to 200 grams if I'm not wrong. I'll put in the exact measurements in the captions below. So we're going to be cutting this into tiny chunks and putting it into the food processor. And we also need cold water for this. We need about 1/4 cup of cold water, and I've measured out 1/4 cup of water and added some ice cubes to it. Since we're going to add the water in like smaller portions and not all at once, it's okay to go easy on the measurements, but be very careful when your dough is assembling. And yes, that's mostly it. We're going to be So if you are using a food processor or if you're doing it by hand, the early breadcrumb stage, so it looks a little bit like breadcrumbs. That is the stage when you should start adding the water little by little. I'm going to add very little water initially, and the consistency that we are looking for is it should come up into a ball by itself when put in the food processor. But when you're mixing by hand, of course it's much more communicative. You need to get a tight dough done. And look, we already have the dough for us. I added very little water, to be honest. Whatever makes the dough come up into this consistency. We're going to be kneading this for some time and then start rolling it out and layering it. So let's start with that. So we have the dough with us. We're going to knead this for about 5 minutes and start doing the folds. I'm going to do the traditional 1/3 fold. I don't know how many more types there are. My knowledge is a little limited when it comes to this. I'm going to use very little dough to just like prevent it from sticking to the board. So yeah, the idea is to roll it out into a rectangle and then fold it in 1/3 in as many times relative to the number of layers that you require. So yeah, let's get started. So I'm just going to fold this without rolling it out in the last step, because we're going to chill this in the freezer for 30 minutes. And I have a Ziploc bag with me. Just going to put it inside and let the dough rest. And this is very important. They often like freeze it for a day or overnight if you have that kind of time, but 30 minutes should be fairly enough. I have some pista with me, and we're going to roughly roast this and make it into a pista creme, which is what we'll be using for the filling. If you prefer a different flavor, you can go ahead and do that. So we have roasted the pistas. It took about 3 to 4 minutes, I would say. The idea is to remove the moisture and not really roast them to be really crispy or anything. So if you just use your rolling pin, you can dehusk the pistas pretty much similar to what you would do with a groundnut. So I'm going to do that, and after that we're going to grind this into a powder. So this is the pista that we roasted, and these are the peels that are lying everywhere. But anyway, case in point, we're going to be adding a little bit of milk to this just to grind it into a very smooth paste. We don't need much. We're going to be adding more milk when we are actually cooking the creme. So this is only to bring the mixture together. So we have the pista paste here. It's not too fine at the moment, but that's not something I'm aiming for, because we're going to add one more ingredient that will kind of balance out the flavors. I have with me gulkan. This was got from Amazon India. You might find any store-bought gulkan in Indian stores near you. So for about 1/4 cup of pista, I'm going to be adding about 2 spoons of gulkan. The good thing about this is if you add this, you don't have to add an extra sugar, because this has more than enough sugar. So that kind of balances out the flavors. And so we're going to begin to make the pistachio creme. I made a mistake that I don't want you to repeat. Do not add the milk before grinding the pista, especially if you have a kind of grinder that does not do a great job with fine grinding. Since we're also adding the gulkan, which is not very fine by itself, this is okay. But if you like something that's like a smooth consistency inside, just avoid it. It's going to make your life easier. I'm going to be adding about 1/8 cup of heavy cream. You can adjust this to the kind of consistency that you want. I'm also adding about 1/8 cup of milk, so I would say equal amounts of both. I'm also going to be adding about three like tiny spoons of jaggery. It does have a considerable amount of sugar, but when you bake something and when it becomes cold, the amount of sugar considerably reduces. I'm going to use a whisk. I'm going to clear out all these bottles so that they don't catch fire. So this does not have a very green color. At this point you would have probably realized that pista is not as green as you see in some of the ice creams and stuff. So if you would like to add some coloring to it, you could do so. You could add matcha or something that alters the taste, of course. So I'm adding about a 1/2 tablespoon. I'm judging that should be more than enough, because we have cream also added to it, which kind of helps with the consistency. So we've almost reached the kind of consistency that we are looking at. So when you do whisk it, you see that it kind of comes out kind of clean, and when it cools down it's going to thicken further, so don't worry about it. So this is the ready custard. We're going to keep this aside in the fridge and pull out our dough and also preheat the oven. Here's our dough. We're going to leave it on the counter for a few minutes for it to thaw, and then we can begin to roll it out. So I let this thaw for about 10 to 15 minutes already, and it's slightly pliable now. We're going to try and use all our beautiful strength to roll this out so that the oven's almost heated up. We do not want that temperature to change too much. So I'll give you a closer look on what I'm trying to do. I feel like I've fairly attained the thickness that I want to. So I'm going to cut them into strips. And the good thing about puff pastry is you can leave it in the freezer and use it for about 3 to 4 days after this. So if you manage to not finish this up in just this recipe, don't worry too much about it. So we're going to make about 3 croissant rolls. And before we forget, one additional step that we'll be adding, since we're not using any egg wash, this is just milk and sugar, and I'm going to uniformly spread it all over the croissant, mostly the top and the sides, so that it browns into a nice beautiful color. If you do consume eggs, go ahead and make the egg wash for them. And let's stress test this. Let's go. Croissants are back from the oven and they took way longer than stated. Okay, one of the reasons might be that store-bought dough has a different kind of consistency in terms of fat and everything else. Or it could mean that the oven's temperatures is not as effective as stated. So we had to keep this for about 30 minutes easily. Based on that, you want to achieve a color that looks roughly like this, like a good golden brown. We might have gone a little over on the tinier ones, but they're still brown, they're not burnt, so which is a good thing. So I'm going to cut one of them. This is the one that we're not going to use for the filling. Just to show you how it looks from the inside. You can see this is how the layers look like. And since this is not really like a donut, it's not going to swell up in volume as much. So let's try and fill the bigger one that we created for the filling. And the rest we're just going to glaze with chocolate that we're anyway going to make for the bigger one. So I have chopped up chocolate. This is roughly 1/4 cup of chocolate. We're going to melt this in the microwave for about 1 minute and pull it out at every 30-second interval. I've melted the chocolate. Be careful if you're going to temper it. We're going to try and use it as tempered chocolate. You do not want to melt the whole thing, so this took about a minute. Make sure no water falls into it because it's going to seize and become an ugly mass of chocolate. So we'll set this aside for now, and I'm going to concentrate on filling it. So I'm not going to use a piping bag because I have so little of the filling. It doesn't really make sense to waste a piping bag on that. So I'm just going to use a cookie cutter to like make a slight hole in the center, and I'm going to add in the filling there. So here we have plated it. There are a few things I realized while I was plating it. You probably want to leave it at the 20-minute mark because your top is not going to get as brown as egg wash. So you might want to remove it at a lighter brown. The thing is, it's slightly in a biscuity consistency at the moment, and it's kind of harder to fill because it's really buttery. Here is the Supreme Croissant, the Mediterranean version, and I'm going to post an improved recipe next week, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. Also leave in the comments what you'd like to see in the next few weeks. and I'm trying to create more simple, homemade, healthy recipes in the meanwhile. Thank you.